So we've got Panthers Bears, the first one that I want to talk about. Matchup that matters here. Obviously, there's a very different Panthers team over the last 2 weeks than what they were through the first 2 weeks with making the switch over to Andy Dalton. Bears still, I don't know. It feels like they haven't necessarily played a game yet where you feel really good, even if they won, but did feel like they were taking some positive steps in the right direction, especially on the offensive side of the football last week. Carmen, what do you think is the matchup that matters here for this game?
Yeah, there's a kind of a sneaky strength in the Bears defensive line, but more specifically on the interior, because as a whole, seventh fewest pressures of any D-line group because that includes the edge rushers. But if you just go on the interior, which is so important for Matt Eberflus to get pressure from the interior, given the fact that he really only tries to get pressure with four. He doesn't blitz a whole lot. He did it a little bit more in the first half of that game against the Rams and Stafford, but then kind of laid off of it in the second half. And that's just not indicative of what his defensive scheme is. You got Andrew Billings, you have Javon Dexter turning into the guys that the Bears kept telling us they were. Javon Dexter was not a 3-tech in college. They drafted him based off traits last year. And we kind of heard in Chicago all of this talk about, no, we have our 3-tech on the roster. We have our 3-tech on the roster. I, in particular, if I had one concern about the Bears defense coming into this season, it was the interior defensive line. Turns out that's kind of been a strength. They have, I believe, the 8th most pressures of any defensive line interior pressures specifically of any team in the league, especially after that game against Matthew Stafford and the Rams. This provides a lot of issues for offensive lines. It's the most direct path to the quarterback if you can get pressure from the interior. And it's not a place that we've seen the Carolina Panthers be super successful. They've been better with Andy Dalton. They are overall better as an offensive line this year, and we're now seeing that, especially with Andy Dalton, who knows how to get rid of the football and is kind of a lot more efficient than we saw Bryce Young be able to be. 73.9 PFF grade as a unit for this Panthers offensive line. The second best pass blocking grade. That is important, but I also think that this is going to be a huge test for them against, a Bears defensive front where from the interior, you're going to get a lot of pressure. And then they have a defensive backfield that can really take advantage of any of these errant throws or bad decisions that these guys can force you into. We've seen that between Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Johnson, any of these guys. They're a really good unit, kind of top to bottom.
I'll switch to the other side of the trenches for my matchup that matters. It's the Panthers pass rush versus the Bears offensive line. And without Derek Brown, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like it's been a struggle for this team. 55.0 team pass rushing grade this year. That's 28th in the NFL. Edge rushers specifically, I think it might be even a little bit worse than that for them, even with Jadeveon Clowney. But then when you look on the other side of things to the Bears pass blocking as a group, 67.6 pass blocking grade. So it's not like they're way better. It's not like this is just a major weakness. And the reason why I think this is a big matchup that matters is specifically because though I would say overall grades for them in pass blocking have been fine. I mentioned like 67.6, like it's fine. I think that was 17th in the NFL, if I remember correctly. So it's right around the middle. But there have been questions with this offensive line. Braxton Jones hasn't looked as good as he was last year, and he certainly hasn't taken that next step up to build off of what we saw last year. Darnell Wright still up and down as their right tackle anyways. Tevin Jenkins, he's been good when he's been healthy, but the center position is not strong for this team. Nate Davis just has not been the player that they have wanted when they signed him. And so it's been inconsistent along that entire offensive line. It looked a little bit better last week, but Carmen, if this group yields a lot of pressure or a good amount of pressure from the Carolina defensive line, now I'm worried about this team. Like now I'm really going to be worried about this offensive line because up to this point, I can just kind of chalk it up to first couple of games, still getting things down. But you got to play well against this Carolina defensive line, all due respect. Yeah. Without Derek Brown, Jadeveon Clowney, okay, he can't be a one-man wrecking crew. I mean, anytime that he's been put in that position throughout his NFL career, he has not been that player that's been able to step up like that. He is an excellent piece when the rest of the defensive line is working together, and that's really how you get the most of him because he's really tough when you cannot focus block him with multiple eyes and multiple bodies. But when you can, who else is really stepping up for this Panthers defensive line? Right. So that to me is a big matchup that matters because in theory, Chicago's offensive line should maybe have the best day that they have had so far this year. But if they don't, not only am I worried about them losing this game to Carolina, I will be then worried about this offensive line moving forward for Chicago. So I think that this is a big time test for them in that matchup. What is your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, well, along those same lines, it's Caleb Williams behind this line because we know that Caleb Williams can get himself out of pressure. He can get himself out of these sticky situations. We're kind of seeing in real time him learning what he can and can't get away with at the NFL level. And you saw, I think early on, especially, he's trying to force the ball down the field on 3rd and short. And you're just like, okay, dude, NFL defenses are ready for that. That's not something you can get away with and that you could in college perhaps, or all of these kind of Houdini-like escapes where he was able to evade pressure, kind of run around in the backfield for 3, 4, 5 seconds and then figure out where he was going with the ball. That's, again, NFL defenses are more ready for that. They're going to catch up with you faster. So he's kind of learning, all right, I can get myself out of pressure. I can throw the ball away. I can not take these sacks. I can, just make sure I'm minimizing those negative plays because at the end of the day, I think it also was a learning curve with Shane Waldron where should Caleb Williams have a little bit more time to throw the ball? Probably. Does he still need to make quicker decisions? Absolutely. Does he need to be presented with more options to get rid of the ball quickly? Yes. And that's what we saw against the Rams. That's what we saw with Caleb Williams using DeAndre Swift as a receiver, getting him out more in space, stretching the field horizontally they ran a lot more zone as far as their run scheme went this last game, and that was able to kind of spring DeAndre Swift. And then they didn't get cute when it came to, all right, we're on the goal line, we need a touchdown. Let's just run Roschon Johnson up the middle with 23 personnel where you've got an offensive lineman blocking for him as a fullback, and You've got 3 tight ends attached to the formation. These are all things that are like having to marry up, and I think that Rams game really did. And so now it's up to Caleb Williams to really understand how that all works together and have the offensive playbook be all available to him and him to make really good decisions, because there have just been too many times where he's forcing the ball down the field, throws over 10 or more yards. He's got the second worst grade of anybody. He's 15 of 40 for 301 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. So 3 of his interceptions have come on these long balls that he just kind of chucks up as prayers. I think he's learning not to do that, and you have to be smart. I think that there is going to be he's going to be tempted against a Panthers defense that, again, like you said, is not performing well, doesn't have a lot of stars. Not only is out Derek Brown, out Shaq Thompson now too.
Yeah.
Still have to be smart with the football. And I don't care if I'm seeing all of these crazy, highlight reel plays from Caleb Williams. I want to see more of the boring stuff, and I want to see the rhythm that this Bears offense is capable of with everything they have at their disposal.
Yeah, it's a good gut check game to see where they're at. And I agree with you. I think that you need to see more of the simple stuff work for them. And this is the opponent to be able to see it against, in my opinion. My plus factor here is Andy Dalton, because it has to be, right? Over the last 2 weeks, 81.6 passing grade. That's 4th in the NFL. Simply put, he has played like one of the best quarterbacks in the league over the last 2 weeks. Now, I'm not saying he necessarily is, but he is coming to the game. And as we've often seen with sometimes veterans, before these guys come in were veteran quarterbacks. They were backups to start the season. They don't got nothing to lose. They're playing with no pressure. And that feels like Andy Dalton just feels like he's having fun out there. It looks like he's having a good time. And obviously we saw that against the Raiders. We even saw it against the Bengals, albeit they weren't able to win that game, but they still scored 24 points. So this one should be a fun one. This is going to be the best defense that he has faced yet. So Andy Dalton, really high PFF passing grade. And I'm excited to see, honestly, a challenge for the Bears secondary as well, because of how fearless he has looked.